In this video, I'm going to show you an absolutely incredible game played in round one. We can also say the quarterfinals of the American Cup in St. Louis. 8 of the country's best players are participating. Hikaru Nakamura, Fabiano Caruana. Only Hans Niemann is missing. And now you might remember there is this history between Hans Niemann and the St. Louis Chess Club. Hans got banned after destroying a hotel room in the city. I'm not sure the ban is still there. Anyway, Hans is not participating. I think he has been playing somewhere in Russia, at least in a place where I prefer not to be. But let's focus on the American Cup. As in round one, we have Fabiano Caruana playing with the white pieces against Ray Robson. And what happens in this game is absolutely bizarre. It's very important to know that the time control of this game, it's 90 minutes. For the entire game. Every move you get a 30-second increment, and that's going to play a very important role in this game as well. Let's see what happens. If you do like my videos, don't forget to subscribe and see more of the action from the American Cup. Here we go. Fabi starts with knight f3, d5, g3, c5, bishop g2, knight f6, castling kingside. Black is going for the setup with fianchettoing the dark squared bishop as well. This looks like normal system, sort of a mix between English and the Grunfeld opening. But here Fabi comes up with a very interesting idea. He gives a check, queen a4, and black blocks it with a knight. And this position has only been seen about 20 times at top level. And in majority of the games, white either captures on d5 or plays knight e5. But knight c3, it is a novelty, which really forced Ray Robson to go for a very deep think. And after 40 minutes, 46 minutes, I should say, he just played here this move, d4, which is a good move, but 46 minutes on one move. What on earth has been thinking about here at this point? Remains a mystery to me. Of course, the critical line is your knight is under an attack, but white ignores it with the move knight e5, exerting pressure on the knight on c6, with the point being that if you do take on c3, well, there is knight takes c6, and white regains the material. A lot of complications, but it all works out for white. Main point being that after b takes c6, queen takes c6, you do have a double attack with a check against the king and the rook. If you block with a knight, there is queen takes rook, and now the line continues by taking on b2. The bishop does support that pawn. Bishop takes, rook a b1. And well, that is interesting position. But very soon, white is going to get a second pawn with a rook against two minor pieces. Looks like white is in really great shape. I very well understand that Ray Robson was not interested entering this line. And he decided to castle. And after knight takes c6, b takes c6, well, the knight is still under an attack. Fabi drops back with a knight to d1. It's still home preparation. Fabi blitzing out his moves. And after bishop d7, black is protecting the pawn. You may consider taking already, but those pawns on the c-file, they are pretty weak anyway. Fabi prefers to play the move d3 so that black can never play that move himself. And after the move e5, bishop takes c6, bishop takes, queen takes. White has won a pawn on move 13, is still in book, and is 1 hour and 20 minutes up on the clock. 13 minutes left for the rest of the game for Ray Robson. And the game is just about to start. Very interesting position. White is better. White is threatening to take a second pawn. Therefore, rook c8 was played. And the queen goes back all the way to g2, so that it's guarding the king in case black was looking for some counterattack against that white king later on. Queen d7, and now white plays the move f3. Excellent idea. Black goes for the move a5, and here white goes for the move b3. Also very understandable, and black has to play very quickly. Went for the move a4, trying to put pressure and try to swap as many pawns as possible. An interesting moment here in the game. How should white develop his pieces? Because that's the main thing. I mean, the bishop on c1, the knight on d1, they are not looking great here yet. And, well, the move played by Fabi, knight b2, it is very understandable, as you do force black to make a decision regarding that pawn on a4. However, the machine really prefers here knight f2, with ideas to go bishop to g5, probably take at some point on f6, and then get the knight into e4, followed by g4. You get a nice grip in the center, the knight hitting the pawn on c5. White is clearly better, has good chances to convert the extra pawn later on. But knight b2 played, pawn takes b3, pawn takes, black goes queen b7, hits the pawn on b3, white defends it. And what to do next? I mean, black has numerous options. Rook a8 looks interesting to deflect the main defender of that pawn on b3. But black instead played queen to b4. And now Fabi continues it, playing in a very logical way. He goes for the move knight a4. But it's funny to see that the machine really does like the other plan with knight e1. But this is not how a top grandmaster is thinking. You're not going back with your knight to execute the same plan later on. Therefore, I think let's focus on the game. Knight a4 makes a lot of sense, but it's not really clear how white is going to improve his position on the queen side. That pawn on b3 has been pretty well blocked. The bishop has to keep the rook defended. The rook cannot move, otherwise you lose the pawn. So looks like it's a game, and well, there are various interesting moves like knight e7, maybe to go f5. Black has very decent compensation for the pawn, but look at this. Bishop h6 played, attacking the bishop. And now after bishop takes bishop, the rook can be taken. Bishop takes f8, rook takes f8, rook to b1, defending the pawn on b3. Black is attacking it one more time. And now the queen comes back to the queen side. So the plan is to go queen d1, queen c2, and so on. And later, hopefully, white is able to push that pawn at some point. Now, if you do take on b3, everything will be swapped and the pawn on c5 will be hanging at the end of the day. So that's not recommended here. Therefore, black starts with knight e7, threatening rook takes b3. But here the queen goes back to d1. Black goes f5, queen c2. And now it is knight f6. And it's a very interesting position in which white has difficulties to make progress. Here, look at this. King g2 played, knight e7, king f2. You can think, why are these guys going back and forth like knight f6, d7, and then king g2, king f2? Could also have played at once. But as I said, it's difficult to make a move. And here, Fabi is clearly playing against black's clock here. Black, for the rest of the game, he is down to a minute at this point. And therefore, after king f7, Caruana played here the move e4. He wants to open up the center. If you do take on e3, then white can take back with the king. And later on, the knight can be brought back into play. This pawn on d4 is therefore very important, keeping that knight out of play. What to do instead? Well, you have a lot of interesting options, including the move f4. If you do take, you take back, and the knight can later jump into e5. But here the followed pawn takes e4. And now you can keep the symmetry on the board. But pawn takes, d takes e4 is also very interesting. Black does obtain a protected passed pawn, but that pawn is not going to run very hard. Look at this, g5 played. Very active move, preventing white from carrying out that pawn break with f4. King g2, now the king has done his job. It's going back to a safer place. And now king e6. Ray Robson is playing super aggressively. The king is supporting the pawns, but there are still queens and rooks on the board. Is this a very well timed decision? Let's find out. Queen d1. What is the queen going to do? After h6, there followed f4. White is opening up the center, preparing to get the queen into the attack. Pawn takes f4, queen g4 check, king d6, and now pawn takes f4. And you can feel the pressure here as white is still up a pawn and launching an attack via the other side of the board. Know that it's not possible to play queen a2 with a double attack against the king and rook, because white can always block with the rook coming to b2. But here, down to only like 30 seconds, Ray Robson felt like now the pawn on b3 is hanging. He decided to take that pawn with the rook. But look at this, there is rook takes b3, and all of a sudden here Ray Robson realized that he can actually not take the rook, because there is queen takes knight, eliminating the defender. After taking with the king, there is knight takes c5 with a double attack, and white will be up a piece. That is huge drama on the board, and that means after sacrificing the rook, black should capture the knight instead. There is no way to play in a different way here. Like, you're down the exchange, and technically speaking, this should be winning for white. You're up the exchange, it's an open king. But apparently things are not so simple. Why things are not so simple? Because there are a lot of weak pawns. And also white's king is wide open and the rook is under an attack. Maybe white can drop back with the rook to b2 to guard the king. That looks like a very sensible decision. However, Fabi, after 20 minutes of thinking here, played here the move queen g6 check. And then after king c7, the king is still pretty well guarded by the knight. Knight covers the b6 square, for instance. No good checks here for white. Rook b2, guarding the king, preserving the rook. Pawn takes f4. And now, still super complicated. What are you going to do? You would like to attack the king, but you also would like to grab a number of pawns. Here, queen takes h6 was played. The engine is very critical of this move. Instead, you should probably go queen f7 to protect the pawn on c4 and keep an eye on that pawn on the f-file. Now, after queen takes h6, Ray Robson is a great tactician. And down to seconds, he found this resource with the move f3 check. Pawn cannot be taken because of queen a3. And here, this time, the double attack does work for black. Therefore, instead, king to g3 played, but it is queen takes c4. Queen f4 check. And the king goes back to c8. White captures the pawn on f3. But it's anybody's game here. Like, the queen is a great piece. Queen c1 hits the rook. Prepares probably some check on g5. Rook a2. And what should black do? Maybe run with the pawns? Queen g5 was played. And here another big moment in the game. Fabi's move king f2 is so natural. However, it is much better to play queen g4. This is a missed opportunity for Fabi. After queen e3, the king can hide on g2, and the queen is fantastically placed. It's pinning the knight on d7, and black cannot run with the c-pawn because of queen g8. That is a very important resource. The queen indirectly stops the march of black's connected passed pawns. Now, let's have a look at the game. They followed king f2, but now it is the move c4. White played here the move queen f5, offering the exchange of queens, but they followed queen to e3, king g2, and now again a big moment in the game. But what is going to happen here? There are no checks. Can black run with those pawns? Well, if you do play a careless move like c3, that would be a huge mistake. Runs into rook a8 check. After king c7, it's rook a7, and the knight will be gone, leading to checkmate very soon. If you do play king b7 instead, there's queen d5, and the queen and rook together, well, they can give a lot of checks and eventually deliver checkmate. Therefore, the other pawn push, d3, was played in the game, and that is a fantastic move because you're not only running with the pawn, but you're also protecting the a7 square. So after, let's say, rook a8, check, the king can come to c7, and everything is under control. There is no good check here because the queen covers that a7 square. Well, instead, queen d5 was played. White is centralizing the queen, and it does look like white is almost winning. But they're followed the move c3, and everything is just under control. They're followed here the move queen c6, and the king goes to d8. If you give a check on a8, there's king e7, and again, the knight is such a great defender. There's no time to launch an attack because they will follow a bunch of checks here now. Therefore, white decided to take the pawn on c3, but that gives black the opportunity to take the pawn on e4 as well. King f2, queen f5 check, and now the king cannot really hide anywhere. If you go, for instance, to g1, there's queen g4, and well, if you block now with the rook, well, there is a queen d1, king f2, queen e2, king g3, queen e3, and there are always enough checks here. The king cannot hide anywhere, as I said. So white played king f2, queen f5, and well, if you do try to run to the other side of the board to go to the e-file, well, after king e3, there is queen e6 with a double attack, and the rook is gone. You're still making a draw because you can eliminate the remaining pawn, but you're not going to win that game. So instead, they followed king to g1, queen g4, king f2, and the players agreed to a draw. At this point, by the way, players were both down to a minute. So white's time advantage of 1 hour and 20 minutes has just completely evaporated. What an incredible Houdini act by Ray Robson with the black pieces. He's holding World's number 3 to a draw after suffering from this opening experiment. Well, was an absolutely incredible game. This was just game 1 of their mini match. Of course, there is another game with Ray Robson playing with the white pieces. Let's see if that will be as exciting as the first game. But hopefully you enjoyed this video, learned something from it as well. And then I will see you very soon again. Bye bye.